So today we're going to take a little bit of a different shift, but for those that have something to write with, this will easily be the most important class, I think, of the entire semester. If you do the things that we talk through in this, they will change the trajectory of your career and change the likelihood of your success at achieving whatever it is that you want your ideal life to look like. I know that's a huge claim to make at the beginning of a lecture, and it's like, whoa, hang on, like slow down. Why is this going to be so important? This is something that I have seen work over and over and over. This is my 20th year teaching production to people wanting to work in the entertainment and music industries. So I have had thousands and thousands of students, many of whom still keep in touch with me, many of whom still come over to my house for dinner, and many of whom have gone on to wild degrees of success that even they might not have imagined when they were in school. So I have a lot of conversations around my fire pit about what the specific choices are that they have made along the way and what has separated them from the pack of people that have achieved ordinary things. And over and over and over, these concepts have come up. The steps that I'm going to walk you through today, the steps you're going to do and turn into me later, the steps that you need to think through for your own projects and purpose and time and how you use it, all of those things factor in. But the reality is, it's actually not that complicated. Whatever it is that you've set your mind to achieving, whatever you want that future ideal career and life to look like, the reality is, right now, it's probably not necessarily going to look like that. It's going to be different because we have no control of the world. How many of you thought we were going to live through a pandemic 3 years ago? Right? And yet here we are. And it's completely changed how many industries? How many of you all want to work in the entertainment or music industry in some way, shape, or form? The majority. How many of you think the music or entertainment industry looks the same now as it did 10 years ago? Who thinks it looks the same as it did 20 years ago? Or even remotely, right? So we know that your career is going to look different than what you think it's going to look like right now, however that thought is circling in your head. How long do you want your career to last? Michael?
Hopefully for the next 40 years for me.
Okay, 40 or so years. Anybody in here planning on retiring someday? Not working anymore? Okay. Well, what age would you like to do that, Becca? 60? Okay, you've set that age for 60. I've set it in my own head for my own life as 50. So I've got about 7 more years to be able to hit that goal. But that doesn't mean I want to stop working because I love what I do. To me, retirement simply means that you don't have to work anymore. You don't have to do things to bring in revenue because you've either built enough passive revenue or built enough other ownership of revenue streams to be able to not work if you so choose. And so one of the things that it takes, the skills that you have to develop to make your career look the way you want it to, is that of being flexible and also knowing how to think exponentially and add the skills that are going to let you live in a career trajectory that takes you to the places that you want to go. So we're talking about this from an exponential thinking point of view. And this came up specifically because the other night I had got, maybe a week or two ago, I had got a text from Vion Isaac. He was a freshman here that I met in 2010. He was super talented music producer, songwriter, learning how to mix and produce his own stuff. And we just became friends, worked on projects, but he was super collaborative. One of the most collaborative people that I've met here in the thousands of students that I've taught how to produce music and work in this space. There was never a time that Vion wasn't finding a classmate to sit down and like work on a project with, or to go and start a business with, or to do something like that. And as a result, over the next bunch of years, Vion was on project after project after project that either he created or played on for a friend, et cetera. And up through a few years ago, when he graduated, he was graduating right around the time Spotify was starting to allow independent artists to put their stuff on his channel or on their app. And he continued working, developing even other artists and releasing his own stuff, and built up to where he was making a decent living. And so for a couple of years, all he was doing full time was producing music. But 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half, right before the pandemic, he and his wife came over and he said, man, you know what? I'm frustrated. He said, I have been doing this for several years. I'm making money, but we want to get married. We want to have a family. We want to have kids. I'm going to need to make even more money than I'm making now to be able to make this work and to make it work long term. And so as we strategized through that and talked about similar projects that we were working on and stuff too, we parted ways. And then of course the pandemic happened. So the other night, We reconnected after his CD release party. It was clear that things were going better for him. And so when they came over, he actually called and invited another student that I knew, Garrison Snell, who had similar situation. Garrison came into Belmont, I think 2010 or 2011. And although he never had a class from me, he was somebody that every time I ran into him, he would ask questions. He would talk about the sort of things he was working on, the projects he was involved in, or the student organizations or whatever, in order to build his skills, because he had a vision of owning not only his own business, but owning many businesses. He wanted his life to be one where he owned businesses, helped his friends launch their careers, was financially successful so that he could reinvest that in making the world better. And so as they all came over to the house and we sat around and we had food and drinks and just had a great time, I said, what has changed for y'all over the last couple of years? And so they both told their story. And for Vion had gone from being a really talented music producer. The internal narrative and loop in his head was that he was a music producer. And 2 years ago, when he realized that like that wasn't going to be enough to hit the goals that he wanted, he said, you know what I did? I sat down and I just started adding skills. I went through online courses on business. I went through online courses on online marketing. I went through online courses on analytics. He said, I realized that a music producer is somebody that's always at the beck and call or the whims of somebody else, hoping that they can make money. He said, but a music businessman is somebody that knows how to create their own revenue streams. They know how to create and manage an entire business that then can make money. And so as a result, he and his wife, also a tremendous artist, have taken those skills, both leveled up, put in the time and the energy, and been really wildly successful. And it's on an even higher upwards train. In the meantime, Garrison told the story of how when he graduated, he had just started as a senior with a friend of his, a marketing company, digital marketing called Gyrosity. And with Gyrosity, he had grown it for a couple of years. They got some big clients that were really rocking, going gangbusters. And then one day his partner said, by the way, I'm out. And I'm taking our biggest clients with me. And his partner bailed, and Garrison started over at zero. And over the course of the next couple of years, he rebuilt. He built his team and added more people and worked using all of those skills he had been building for years now, and then turned that into a company that he ultimately sold for over $1 million. And in the last year and a half, he had reinvested that money into buying 3 or 4 other businesses in a variety of related fields. And he and Vion were now working together to grow even other businesses in entertainment. I share those 2 stories because they're just 2 examples of people that were really talented. They had a lot of connection. They clicked well with people. But the difference between them and their ultimate success was the steps that we're going to take you through today. So I share those stories because it really clicked to me that this is something that, as I've shared this with individuals, I have lots of other stories of people that I have given these exact steps to when they come to my office, when they invest the time in getting to know me and in thinking about their career strategy, that we get the opportunity to really help strategize that. But this is one of the first times that I've got to share it in a classroom environment and encourage you guys to take these steps. So let me ask you, when you think about it, what actions can you take that ultimately help you to emulate their trajectory and ultimately their success? So let's walk through it. There's a couple of great quotes that I think help put the brain in the right mindset. They say time always changes things, but you actually have to change them yourself. Time doesn't change things. If you don't take the steps, then you don't get the outcomes. If you do take the steps, you do dramatically increase your odds of achieving those outcomes. And if you don't have a plan, well, there's a great quote from Jim Rohn. If you don't design your own life plan, chances are you'll fall into someone else's plan. And guess what they have planned for you? Not much. Because humans are all occupied with building our own careers, taking care of our own families, thinking about our own dreams. And while we can all the time find ways to collaborate and create great things together, most people are not going home. And when I say most people, really no one else is going home and thinking, how can I make Michael's life better? How can I make Laura successful? They're all working on those things for themselves. So here's what I want you to do. We're going to start just by seeing where you're at mentally. Building a life plan first means you've got to be able to boil down what your ideal life would even look like. And then we're going to go through and apply this to practical things you can do with your summer, a series of practical steps you can do with this summer that will completely alter your life trajectory. So in 4 sentences, I want you to just describe your ideal future. Maybe a sentence about what you want your family to look like. What do you want your work life to look like? Let me show you mine, and then I'm going to give you 3 minutes to work on yours. My life plan back when I was your age, 20 years ago, almost exactly, was I will have a beautiful wife and family that I'll love, support, grow, and travel the world with. I'll be surrounded by people who love production and entertainment and ultimately technology too. I'll have enough money and resources. I won't have to fear it. Pandemics won't be something I'm afraid of. Businesses closing, changes in industry. I want to have enough resources that I don't have to worry or think about money. And just my own personal preference, ever since I have started working as a teenager, I have a preference. I will work intensely for periods of time. I'll work like crazy on a project, but then I want a vacation so hard that you can't find me on a map. And ever since, for 20 years now, this has been, for the most part, my life. And I did this through a lot of luck, a lot of great support by other people, but also through the steps that we're going to take today. So take a minute, go through and make your own 4 sentences. Think about what you want your work life to look like. Think about what you want your family life to look like. Think about how you like to work. What would be the environment? Not necessarily the business, because the business might change. Live sound went away for the last year. But think about what your life would look like. Everybody I know that went into live sound, for example, they loved to travel. They loved to be involved in live events. So think about that and give me 4 sentences. I'll throw a little timer up just for 2 minutes. Looking around, I see people still writing. Does anybody have some they'd like to share with us? They'd be willing to share? You don't have to have all 4 yet, but what does your dream scenario look like? Becca.
Travel and work with musicians all over the country or world to bring their visions to life.
Travel and work with musicians all over the world to bring their visions to life. Very cool. That's an interesting career, no question. Anybody else? I see people still writing. Anna Lee, what about you?
I will have a career in writing where I am able to write what I love and not have it feel like work.
Write what you enjoy and not have it feel like work. That is a good thing for sure. How about Jamie?
One of mine was that I'll always work in a creative industry that doesn't operate on a 9 to 5 schedule.
Nice. Don't want the 9 to 5. I understand that. Jake, how about you?
I'm sorry, to say me.
Yeah,
No, sorry.
it's okay. He was deep in writing his.
Sorry. I said that one day I'll be able to do something big that can help make the world a better place.
Something big that can help make the world a better
Not sure
place.
what yet, but something.
Hey, well, those things change. So when we think about this, when we think about these steps, quit a list real quick. When we think about these dreams, what does it take to actually get there, right? So when we think about what your dream life looks like in 3 or so sentences, your dream career, what that looks like. When I think about mine, of course, it started 20 years ago, 21 technically at this point, because I remember right out of college when I finished my undergrad and my first grad degree, my MBA, I went to work for a company called Sweetwater who said that this is your dream job. And that dream job looked like sales, doing recording studios. So you remember when you think back to my little dream life scenario, I wanted to be surrounded by people who loved production and entertainment. In sales, it makes great money. So I knew that ultimately that path could lead me to good money, but it didn't fit these first two, or it didn't fit the first one or the last one. Problem with sales was you work like crazy, sometimes 50, 60 hours a week. When I first got in there, the vacation time was like 5 days of vacation in a year. There was no option. You could work like crazy, but there was no option to then disappear and vacation hard so that people couldn't find you on a map. So I could work intensely, but I couldn't get that second part. The other part was I thought, man, if I'm working here, I looked around and I saw some of the people that had been most successful there seemed like their relationships were terrible. Several were in like second or third marriages. And around that same time, I met my wife and I thought, that's not what I want. Like, you're not going to find many girls like my wife. So I thought, I don't want a career like this. So ultimately, in thinking that through and being able to compare it to the sentences, I knew that I needed to be looking for something else. As much as I liked it and I wanted the connections there, I knew that I wanted to be moving towards something else. And so one day I was talking to a client on the phone and I said, what is it you're doing home in the middle of the day? I was feeling particularly worn out that day. And he said, we're spring break. I said, what kind of adult is on spring break? And he said, I'm a professor. I teach audio engineering in Nashville. I said, there are degrees in audio engineering? I have my master's degree. What would it take for me to get into that field? And ultimately, of course, that's what led to me teaching and working at MTSU, going into teaching. And then that has been my entire career, and a career that fit all of the goals that I wanted. Now, ultimately, the only goal that teaching didn't fit was having enough money, because teaching, I don't know if you know, typically doesn't pay much money. Belmont might be a little different, but at MTSU early in my career was not the case. But I knew that it would give me the free time over breaks and summers and Christmases to pursue my own business ideas and grow those. So by pursuing that, I knew that that was going to facilitate the opportunity to be able to do the other things that I wanted. So when you think about yours, what do you need to do? What steps can you take that will pivot and increase your odds of success? So there's an old saying, talent plus connection equals opportunity. And a lot of students that I've talked with over the years, when I say, what's it going to take for you to be successful? They say, well, I got to know the right people, right? I got to build the basic skills. I got to have the skills, but I also need to know the right people. Well, how do you get to know the right people? Well, all of you guys are in good shape. Those of you on campus in better shape than maybe those off, because you're able to physically meet people in person. But hopefully by next semester, everybody's able to return and actually meet all of the connections that come onto this campus in person and start to build those connections, because that does create opportunity. But what it starts to show us is that most people, not most students, most people think their life is going to be something like this, right? My life is so predictable. Progress over time, moving your way up, and you're thinking that here's where things are going to end up, just kind of a nice orderly venture. But as we've all seen with this pandemic, or those of us that are following technology, we know that that's not how it's going to happen. Because exponential technology means that things are going to continue to change even more rapidly over the next 40 years than they have over the previous 40 and beyond. Whole industries are going to be created, whole industries are going to be reshaped, and other industries are going to be destroyed, because it's ultimately going to look like this. Exponential growth of technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchains, cryptocurrency, the internet, all the above are going to completely rewrite the way the world works, in the same way that the world of today doesn't look like it did 10, 20, 30, or 40 years ago. So if we know that it's going to change, we've got kind of two options. Continue to pursue that linear path or try something different. And when we think about it, it's pretty straightforward. If you want an average successful life, you don't have to plan too much. Stay out of trouble, go to school, and apply for jobs you like. But if you want to have an extraordinary life that meets all four of those criteria you just set out for yourself, you've got two options. I call them the 595 and the 80-20 option. The 595, some people will describe this as the specialist versus the generalist. The specialist who's somebody who's invested all their time and energy at becoming great at one thing, right? And the generalist is somebody who has invested time and energy into building a basket of marketable, valuable skills and also learning how to add to that basket as they go. Because as you add to the basket, just like my friend Vion, who has 100 million streams on Spotify now and makes his living as a music producer, he had a basket of great music producer skills, but he lacked the basket to get him where he needed to go. So by investing his time strategically in learning the skills that he needed to add to live in this new music industry, he's been successful. If he hadn't done that, he probably would have retired from music and it would have turned into a hobby. And who knows what he'd be doing today. So you can become a specialist or you can build a generalized set of skills that create, and here's the important thing, rare value. How many of you have a friend that is a specialist? Somebody who spends every second of their time in pursuit of one goal. I'm sure you know somebody at Belmont. Who knows somebody that's here like to become a professional guitar player? Or anybody knows, or a professional musician? Do they spend every minute of their time practicing? Are they involved in multiple bands? Do they talk and live and breathe guitar or singing or whatever that is? Can anyone think of somebody like that that's actually a 5%er? Now, some of y'all can't even think of one. Why? Because they're rare. It's very unusual. Somebody who's a specialist is somebody that's so single-minded about what they want to do that if they're that 5%, they want to become the best at one specific thing. And that's not bad. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that 95% of us are not that. And that's not only okay, it's actually a good thing. Why? When you think about the fact that it's difficult to near impossibility to become a specialist like that, most people will never play in the NBA. Most people never make a platinum album. But why is becoming a specialist particularly dangerous? Well, I can think of a bunch of different friends and former students of mine that put all their energy and career into building a live sound career, and they have done it and been successful and toured with everybody. And guess what happened to them this last year? Right? Scorched earth. They've been trying to figure out what to do for a year. But the ones who had continued to add related skills, related marketable skills that made them a rare value, you know what they did? They pivoted right into live streaming or live other kinds of events or live online events, all of which have exploded this year. Guess what kind of a year those folks have had? Some of them say it's the best year they've ever had. They've made the most money they've ever made. So being a specialist is not a bad thing, because the better you get at it, the more you can hit those dead arrows right in the middle of the target. But generalists have a much higher likelihood of hitting the target that they're looking for. They may not hit this one thing but most of us aren't that specific either. So the other option is an 80-20 option. Become very good, as in the top 25% of the people in a room, at 2 or more things. And the more things you add, guess what? The more arrows you're going to sink in your bullseye, the more arrows you're going to sink on that target. So when we think about this, the more areas you add, the greater your odds of success. And this has been studied over and over and over. Generalists tend to do better in life than specialists. So when we think about this, combining 2 or 3 separate skills into one profession, you can become successful, because as you get to the top 25% of the people in a room with multiple marketable skills, it's both a realistic path that every single one of you can take, and you don't have to be the best. And it takes way less time to get in the top 25% of people in a room than you might think. So let me just tell you a little bit of mine, and then let's jump into yours and have you start to list yours out. So my journey, here's me looking silly, just like, I'm not going to say any of you. You guys are all much more stylish and interesting than I was. But I also was in college at one time. I came in with not that many skills. I'm a pretty good talker. I love talking and I love people. So verbal communication, and I'm an avid reader. So I had developed some good writing skills. As it would happen, you need to build at least one of those skills. If you're in a basket of 50 people applying for the same job, the person who's the best communicator will get that job every time, 100%. So having something like that, but other than that, I didn't use a computer until I was a freshman in college, almost a sophomore. I'd never even thought about creating stuff inside a computer, didn't know anything. In fact, I had these internal narratives that computers hated me and that like I didn't know how to use them. So ultimately, those were all I had. And sure, I went to college and I learned other things. I invested a couple thousand hours in learning computers because it occurred to me that if everything production-wise, audio and video was about to move into the computer, and this is the late 90s, so it was not yet there. But as it was moving in, I thought if I can learn this tool, I can learn all of the things that I need to create the content that I want. So I invested the time in adding that skill, 2,000 hours into that. So here's my question to you. I want you to list 3 skills, and here's how you're going to quantify them. Imagine you're in a room of 100 random people, okay? Not 100 specialists, not 100 doctors, not 100 live sound people, 100 random people. What skills do you currently have that you think you'd be in the top 25% of that room? If they said, all right, 100 room full of 100 people, let's rank you all by your piano playing ability. Do you think you'd be in the top 25? Write it down. If they said, all right, let's rank you all from 1 to 100, best joke teller in the room, best comedian. If you think you'd be in the top 25, write it down. So write down 3 things about you, 3 skills that you've already invested the time or naturally came along through your life and circumstances. And after you've done that, take note and put them as either a 1, you're a novice, or 5, you're already a full-time professional. Let me give you 2 minutes to do that. All right, Oriana, what are some of your skills that you think you're in the top 25% of a room of 100 random people?
I said good at connecting with people on a deeper personal level.
Nice.
And I'm still thinking of my other 2 skills because I have no idea.
Okay, that's a good one. I can tell you right now, as somebody that loves deeply connecting with people on a personal level and spends countless hours every year around a fire pit doing exactly that, that skill can take you very far in life. Jamie, how about you? I'm trying to go through and hit everybody, but the squares keep rearranging. So apologize if, or I'm sorry if I call on you several times.
One I put was content creation
Interesting.
and then like public relations writing.
Interesting. Public relations and content creation. Okay. How about you, Grace?
I wrote communication and I can't speak English today. Relatability.
Relatability.
And then the second one I wrote was the ability to control the attention of a room. And then the third one I wrote was to write about relatable stories and characters.
Interesting. That is quite the array of options. Let's see. Emma, how about you? I like those. Okay. Emma says written communication and graphic design. This is good. These are all great places to start. And let's keep going. So how many of you are familiar with the 10,000 hour rule? What is it? Becca?
If you spend 10,000 hours doing something, you'll become
An expert. Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called Outliers, where he did a long study of what made the most successful people the most successful. And one of those things was that they had all invested an average of 10,000 hours in getting their skill to the place where it was. He made a long section in the book about Bill Gates, obviously the founder of Microsoft and one of the wealthiest people on planet Earth, worth north of $100 billion. And he talked about how Bill Gates just happened to come about, be born at a time and a place where he happened to live just down the road from this major university that got a computer system. He had a teacher and some opportunities that got him interested in computers in the late 70s, when this was not something you would just throw on your lap. It was a giant machine with punch cards. And not only did he get those opportunities as a freshman, but as he continued to work on it and he fell in love with it so much, even as a teenager, he would sneak out at night to go down the road to this university with some friends where they got access to this computer time, which was incredibly expensive. And they would program all night using punch cards, so that by the time he even was at Harvard and dropped out, I think, if I remember correctly, dropped out after his freshman or sophomore year, he already had accumulated 10,000 hours of experience programming computers as an 18 or 19-year-old. That's obviously incredibly unusual. But if it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert, and I think we could argue that Bill Gates is an expert and a specialist in his field, or at least was at the time, there's another rule that's equally important to helping you pursue your goals if you're more of a generalist. And that is the 80-20 rule. Who knows what the 80-20 rule is? Who's heard of the 80-20 rule before? Raise your hand. Maybe one. So this rule I learned in 2007, and what stuck out to me was that it already described a lot about the way I approached life. And I didn't realize why many things seemed to work out consistently for me and why I was able to do things a lot faster than the people around me. And it wasn't because I was any smarter. It's because I tended to shoot for the 20% of the things or of the work that was going to create the most impact on the output. Here's the way you might have heard it. An economist in the 1800s noticed a statistical principle that kept happening. He noticed that 20% of the population in his country had 80% of the wealth. He noticed that 20% of the people in an organization seemed like they were doing about 80% of the work. How many of you have ever done a group project with 3 or 4 people? How many of you have ever been the one doing most of the work? Okay, so that 20-80 rule just kept coming up over and over and over until he realized it was, as a statistical principle, it applied in a lot of different ways. Who in here has learned to play an instrument? Okay, is there anyone that's invested 1,000 hours into their instrument? Maybe a couple of people. Okay, so when did you learn the bulk of what you learned in that 1,000 hours? Well, according to the 80-20 rule, you learned it in the first 200 hours. If you are an expert with 10,000 hours, that means the 80-20 rule would say that you are nearly indistinguishable from expert. You're 80% of the way there in the first 2,000. And this number keeps breaking down. Does anyone know has anyone invested like 100 hours into something, learning something, and then be like, nah, not for me? Has anyone invested about 100 hours, maybe a couple of months worth of lessons, and then decided that just wasn't for you? Becca, what was it?
Well, I was writing music video and I shot the whole thing. And then I realized in post-production that I needed more skills
Yeah.
than I thought I needed. So
Yeah.
I had to like put it on the back burner and
There you go. But you kind of let that go. I had another girl in class yesterday say she spent about 100 hours learning guitar and then just decided like, this is not really that interesting to me. And so she put it down. But when did she learn the bulk of it? In that first 20 hours, right? She learned how to strum. She learned how to hold it. She learned what the notes are. She learned what the strings are. She played and played and played. And the 80-20 rule keeps working out. The first 20 hours, she learned 80% of it. Now, the reality is there's a couple other factors to consider. In that first 20 hours, she learned 80% of what she would learn in 100 hours, but you have to still put in the whole 100 hours. It's just that over that last 80% of the time, you're just getting little things here and there, right? So you still have to put in the whole thing if you want to become the expert, but she would be nearly indistinguishable after 20 hours to most of us than she would at 100. At the same time, if we compared an expert, do you think an expert with 10,000 hours can tell if you're somebody with only 2,000 hours? Yeah, right? They had another extra 8,000 hours to fill in all those little gaps. But in the first 2,000 hours, you're going to be virtually indistinguishable to anyone except for that 10,000 hour person. So knowing this, when I got into college, I didn't, like I said, didn't have many other skills, but I learned that technology was going to let me pursue all the dreams that I wanted. So I spent initially about 20 hours. I got over my fear of computers in maybe the goofiest way possible. I was afraid of them. Every time I touched one, things went wrong. I didn't understand them, but I decided, you know what? I'm going to put 20 hours into this. I'm going to go to the computer lab every night and I'm going to click on things until it crashes. I'm going to click on it. I have no fear. It's not my computer. When it crashes, I'm going to get up and I'm going to walk away because I'm going to let the computer lab deal with it. So I did every day. I dug deep. I tried deleting files. I tried editing things. The internet was very young, so we couldn't Google much, but Google didn't exist. But you know, I spent that 20 hours. And what I found was, holy shit, I enjoy this. Like, this is actually kind of cool. And oh my gosh, I can do these other things. And oh wow, what is this internet? Like, we could chat over text with people in other places. And at the end of that 20 hours, I suddenly was hooked. Now, there's plenty of things in my life I've spent 20 hours on only to find like, nah, I'm good. Like, not my thing. And I moved on. Nothing wrong with that. But that 20 hours has come back to benefit me in other ways. So when you think about it, you don't have to start by thinking, oh, I don't know that skill. I'm not that kind of a person. I'm not a technology person like I did. You can rewrite that narrative in often as little as 20 hours of dedicated focus on it and doing it the right way. So over the course of those 4 years, I learned technology, I learned computers. I spent about 2,000 hours over the course of those 4 years, maybe more. And I learned audio engineering. Self-taught, I just had to do it on my own. There was no YouTube, there was no Google, there was no LinkedIn learning, but I spent 2,000 hours just trying it on my own. And that ultimately led to the opportunities post-college, right? Post-college, going to work at Sweetwater, and then ultimately getting into teaching was because I had spent that 2,000 hours on building those particular skills. If I hadn't, the Sweetwater opportunity never would have came, and then I never would have got into teaching. So it took all of those skills. Ultimately, after I started teaching, I had different opportunities. I looked around for problems because how many of you have ever felt like the dumbest person in the room? That's usually how I feel, especially being surrounded by other professionals and colleagues and stuff like that. But when I went to and started teaching here at MTSU, and here you can see my ridiculous first instructional video with the worst green screen you've ever seen. But when I got there, I realized I was the least accomplished person in the room. All of my colleagues were better audio engineers, way more accomplished. I was only 24 or 25 years old when I started teaching at MTSU. So there was no way I was going to compete on sheer talent and experience. So instead, I looked around, and the previous year, I'd done my first video for somebody. I didn't really know anything about video production, but I knew how to hold a camera. And a friend of mine had hired me to shoot this video, and it ended up terribly. Underexposed cameras, bad audio in different places. I learned a lot about like post-production, just trying to fix it. But when I looked around, I saw my students didn't know how to use certain things like consoles and stuff after hours. I thought, what if I did some instructional videos? There were no videos. There was no YouTube. There was nothing like that. So I borrowed a camera, borrowed a computer, and taught myself how to start shooting and editing video. I spent about 20 hours initially, and over the course of that year, maybe 200 hours learning basic shooting and basic video editing. Started cranking out these videos where you can see 66,000 views on this 15-year-old video on YouTube, where they then were consistently helping my students and helping my faculty colleagues. A few years after that, that same friend came back and gave me another chance at producing another video for him because I said, I've actually been doing a lot more video work I'd be happy to demo a video for you. And so he hired me to produce this series that I've told you about before. Ultimately, as I produced that, he went on and sold $35 million worth of this first big video series that I'd ever created, with only 20 to 200 hours worth of learning. So ultimately, as that continued and expanded, I thought, man, I'd like to start my own company. Like, I'd love to sell millions of dollars worth of something. I mean, if I had produced all of that in my room, but I didn't realize something, that when I started producing my own content, writing a book, producing my first videos, that I was going to have to learn more. And it's like I've told you before, all of a sudden I realized, oh my gosh, we need graphics for this. And there was no way to buy graphics online or hire somebody online. So I sat down 14 years ago when my son was born. I had a month off, and somebody had given me a DVD or a DVD-ROM of a lynda.com Photoshop series. And I spent 20 hours going through that series that month. And that's the last Photoshop course I've ever taken. But it taught me enough to do all of the graphic work for every website I've had, every business I've had since. And over the course of that time, I probably put in 200. And then I put in 20 hours and then 200 hours learning basic web design. And I started working on improving my writing to actually be able to tell and sell copy. And then ultimately, as that continued to expand and I wanted to get it into businesses, I realized I got some other skills. But I had learned by this point, I don't have to spend 10,000 hours to learn these skills. I have to start with 20. And if I love it, I expand that to 200. And if I love that, then I can take it on the way to 2000. So over those next bunch of years, I spent 20 hours first learning about web sales, probably ultimately 200, and then more ever since. Project management, didn't know how to do that. Started learning how to do it, took it up to until we had dozens of projects. How do I pitch to a retailer? How do I convince a company to sell my products? I spent 20 hours learning that, and then I expanded it to thousands now. And then ultimately improving my graphic design too. Again, everything, 20 hours, 20 hours, 20 hours to get started. And then only if I loved it would I keep going on to 200. So let's talk about yours. What related skills could you learn with an 80-20 approach? Ideally, there's a few things. It could be as simple as learning how to sell more effectively. The person who can sell and has an otherwise same basket of talents as the rest of the people in the room, the person who can sell, verbal or written communication, right? They will always get the job because a business owner needs somebody that brings in business. So at least one should be some kind of written or verbal communication. Ideally, if you don't have that already, if you do, great. But otherwise, give me another couple of skills that are related. So for example, let's go to Bella. Belle, what were some of your initial skills? The first three.
The ability to make friends quickly.
Yep.
And then I can just, like Oriana was saying, just go in a deep level with anyone.
Okay, excellent. All right, so what are some related skills there that could help you turn that into a career? So for example, Emma said graphic design and what else? Written communication. So who hires, not necessarily a business, could be entrepreneurs, but who hires somebody with good written communication and graphic design skills? You can sell those skills online via sites like Canva or Upwork. You can sell them on Fiverr. You can go work for a company. There's a million possible options there. But what are some related skills that if you added even 20 hours worth would more than multiply your opportunities? So think about it. Either skills you're already trying to pursue or things that you feel like are related and they could continue to amplify your opportunities. Take a minute and put that in. All right, while you're thinking about it, let me give you two examples. 11 years ago, I started teaching here at Belmont. I had a student from MTSU from a couple of years earlier that had graduated, and he had spent the last couple of years out trying to build a post-production career doing audio for video here in Nashville. It's not the most common career around here, more of it now than there was 11 years ago, but he was making a living. But similar to the friends I was telling you about earlier, Bobby was frustrated. He had been out of school for several years. He tried to do it a little bit as an entrepreneurial thing, realized he didn't really enjoy the entrepreneurship thing, and wanted to work for a company. But he wanted to get married to his then fiance. He wanted to have kids. And he said, you know what? I'd love a 9-to-5 job doing audio. Those were just in short supply. There weren't studios hiring. They said, I'd love to have a job with insurance and good pay and vacation time where I can stably raise my family. And I said, okay, what are you finding when you're looking for post-production jobs? And Bobby said, I'm just not finding a lot of post audio jobs. There might be other stuff out there, but for audio post, I'm just not finding it. I said, okay, so what other related skills have you added? And he said, well, I don't know what you mean. I'm an audio person. I do sound for picture. And I said, who do you work with? Or who in your ideal scenario would you work with? And he said, well, I work with people that shoot and produce video. I've worked with people that are producing products, and I help with the audio for that. I've worked with people that do some television and some radio. And I said, okay, so it sounds like of those related skills, you need to invest at least 20 hours in learning to speak those languages. So I said, here's my subscription to lynda.com at the time. Here's my subscription to Adobe. So you can go through, and I said, over the next 2 months, you have no other hobbies. You come home every night from whatever you're doing, and you put at least 20 hours per project into learning Adobe Premiere, learn video editing, 20 hours into video editing, put 20 hours into learning Photoshop, put 20 hours into learning After Effects, or pick one. It almost doesn't matter, but pick those things that are the things that the other people do. And as you learn those, I said, when you do that, you will have a job within 2 months, guaranteed. And within 2 months, he came back to me and he said, you won't believe this. He didn't know me well. You won't believe this, but I'm in the last round of interviews for working with Dave Ramsey. Is that right? Dave Ramsey down in the big financial planner. And you know why? He's a great guy. He was otherwise great for the job, but he said, as soon as I started going through that course, I made it through 20 hours of learning video editing and Premiere. He said, and I realized all of a sudden I saw jobs everywhere, jobs I didn't even know existed and jobs I hadn't seen before. Suddenly I saw all these jobs. I said, why do you think you didn't see them? He said, I don't know. I said, because your brain filtered them out. How many of y'all remember your first car? Assuming you have a car. Something similar. Your first trendy outfit, whatever, your first watch, iPhone. How many of you, as soon as you got that car, suddenly saw the same kind of car everywhere? Anybody? Yeah, why? Grace, why did you suddenly see that car everywhere?
Because you were looking for it.
Well, did you feel like you were out looking for it? Maybe.
No, I feel like you're just more aware of it. Now that you have it, you're like, I'm in this car. Oh, there's another one.
Yes, and it comes down to this. Your brain has not evolved to look for cars or look for phones. Your brain has evolved to keep you alive and help you reproduce. That's it. We've got ancestors for all the way back, and that's the only thing. But as a result, most of its time is not spent looking for things. It's spent filtering things out. None of you could identify or tell me right now how many lights are above you in your room right now, because your brain filters that out. It says not important, right? Everybody's looking now, but your brain says not important until you got that car, in which case your brain goes, oh geez, I guess a Prius is really important. It takes the filter off and all of a sudden it sees it everywhere. You'll notice this with everything. So simply taking the filter off your brain is enough, or was enough for Bobby to suddenly realize, two things. One, that video editing wasn't that hard. He already was an expert audio editor. So learning video editing, he was like, oh, I can do this. And all of a sudden this new loop started to play. He started to think of himself as, I'm also becoming a video editor, right? Before he was, I don't do video. Now it was, I'm becoming a video editor. And as a result, I'm becoming somebody that can use Photoshop. I'm becoming somebody. And as that new narrative happened, all of a sudden his brain filters were off and jobs were everywhere. And he saw this opportunity at Dave Ramsey that said, Looking for an audio professional must also be able to work with video and graphics, etc. And because he had that 50 or 60 hours over a couple of months invested in 20 hours a piece in those things, the filter was gone. His brain saw it. He applied. He was the perfect fit. Because do you think they wanted to hire somebody with just audio skills? No. That audio person has to be able to talk to the video people and the graphics people. And if something goes wrong with the video or the audio, he needs to be able to fix it quickly and understand it. 2 years later, he came back to me and said, man, we've expanded so much. I'm looking for another person. And as it would happen, I had another person that I had given that exact same advice the week two before. And that guy had, or the month before, and that guy had put that same time in. He was hired within a month. I could give you dozens of examples like it. But what are some related skills, Jake?
I said, well, because one of my originals is like photography.
Yeah.
But the one that I said is not just about like being able to shoot. Remember, it's working with a subject.
Yes, absolutely. If you learn how to work with people and get the pose and the look and the location, there are a million related skills to photography. Understanding business, understanding how to market yourself, understanding how to run your business. You have to have a deep knowledge of file management, knowing how to go and network with people who are looking to hire photographers. Those are all skills that if you put 20 good hours on something like a LinkedIn or another similar course, you will suddenly have the filters off and you'll see opportunities you never saw before. Excellent example. How about you, Hader? Some related skills?
That I want to build up on.
Sure.
My negotiation skills.
Good one. How about you, Jordan?
Well, one of them is video production for me. So this has helped me get some of those hours, and also content creation, just putting things out there, because I do a lot of time like making things and learning things, but not
and then
so
hiding
much
it in a folder.
sharing it.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. So now that we know that we can find and build these related skills, just one last thing on my journey, and then let's build your plan. So it was 2007, and I had been looking for a couple of years to buy a recording studio, buy or build a building that I could create my own recording community in. So now, mind you, I didn't know anything about owning a building or buying a building or running a building or how to take care of it. I didn't know any of those things. I just figured all that was going to be fine. But I looked and looked and looked. And in 2007, I got an opportunity. I found this amazing building there on the square. Through a series of circumstances, I got to meet the owner. He was ready to sell it and move on. And I said, man, I'd love to be able to buy it from you. And he told me his price. And I thought, there's no chance I'm going to be able to get a bank to loan me that much money. So I sat down, I said, give me a couple of weeks and let me get back to you. And I spent those couple of weeks learning how to write a pitch, learning how to do the numbers so I could show, okay, how much can I make from this building? And in the worst case scenario, and how much of a loan can I get? Those several weeks, actually it was almost a month. That was my whole hobby, was learning those things in the hopes that I could get him to sell it to me for a lower price. And when I sent my offer back to him, it was both well-written and it was the good data. Like, here's why I cannot pay your price, what you're asking, but here's why I believe the price I'm offering is fair. And he came back to me and he said, man, that's really tough, but you know what? Like, I don't live here. I'm back in Florida. My son has graduated from MTSU. He's not even there anymore. I don't have anything attaching me. So if you'll meet me right here, then we'll make it happen. And I did, and I've had that building ever since, and them all million things. But that 20 hours invested in understanding the business and pitching and all that stuff is the reason that I got that building. And then I spent thousands of hours since learning business management, employee management, property management, all crazy. So let's make your plan now for the summer. A few tips. Don't chase your passion. Just because you think you enjoy something now, guess what? You of tomorrow and next year is going to change. I was telling a friend the other day, or I've said this to so many college students. How many of you right now at 18, 19, who's 18, 19 years old? 18, 19, 20? Okay. So how many of you still think and are interested in the same things you were in when you were 13? Okay, a couple people, maybe one or two things. But you change as much from 13 or 14 to 20, and you'll change that much again from 20 or so to 25. You'll change that much again from 25 to 30, although it seems like it levels off a bit. But then late 30s, holy cow, guys, I can tell you from experience and from having a lot of friends, things change again. So there's going to be this constant evolution of you. So don't just chase a passion just because you love something now. There's nothing wrong with that. But passion comes from being successful. And the steps we're about to go through will make you successful. Build systems, not goals. Last example before we jump into this for the last 15 minutes. Until 4 years ago, I had never been physically fit in my life. I was always out of shape, and that was a decision of mine because I'd never known how to work out. I never enjoyed any sports. So I didn't know that was even a thing that I could become. When somebody would say, oh, do you like sports or working out? Like, no. That was the internal narrative. That was the loop that played in my brain. Nope, I don't like it. But I realized as you get older, things get harder. Your body starts to hurt more if you're not in shape. And as a result, it became clear I had to do something about this. But how, when I thought of myself as somebody that doesn't like working out? So I learned that the key is to not build a goal. I will work out every day. Because guess what happens the first day you fail to work out? I already said I'm not somebody that enjoys working out. I don't like working out. I don't like going to the gym. It just reinforces that loop. But my system was this. I followed the advice of this guy who said your system needs to be not to work out every day. It needs to be to go to the gym and put on your gym clothes every day. Something there's no reason not to do. And so for a year, I went over to the gym and he said, go and put on your clothes. And if you get there and you're like, I can't do it today, great. Because the system is to show up in your gym clothes every day. So I showed up in my gym clothes every day. And over the course of the first month or two, there were 3 or 4 times I got there, did 1 minute on the elliptical and bailed. I was like, hey, I'm doing the system. And over the course of that month, though, things started to change. And after a year of it, I found myself talking to a friend one time and they said, hey, you look like you've been working out. Are you working, you enjoy it? Are you somebody that enjoys that? I said, yeah. And I just realized my internal loop had changed. Yes, I am somebody that enjoys that. And it was only because I worked the system of showing up in my gym clothes and letting myself not work out the days I didn't want to. But the system will work over time. Failure will give you the opportunity to grow. And we want to add skills that help you create a unique, rare, valuable combination. I'll give you one last tip on this. If you can learn digital marketing, which you can, every single one of you will make yourselves a force multiplier. And by force multiplier, I mean that if you have gone through a Facebook ads course or a Google ads course or a Google Analytics course, and there's you and 50 other interns applying for the same job, if you have that skill, you will be the one that gets the job every time. My wife and I hired a person a month ago, and there was a field of people that looked very similar, and she had put herself through 2 different week-long Google ads and Facebook ads courses. She was the only choice. There was no reason we would choose somebody else because that's where all of the money comes from now. It's by putting ads out where the billions of people are floating around. And so somebody that speaks that language is a force multiplier. It's even more valuable. Now, that doesn't mean you have to like it, but even speaking the language of Facebook ads, you'll find like, oh, this is a learnable skill. So the market's going to reward your execution, not your ideas. Writing down the list of skills is not execution, but let's go through and build your execution plan now. You want to build a system for acquiring 2 to 3 skills, utilizing the 80-20 rule to move you to the top 25% of people in a room. This means that you can probably put in 20 hours into learning graphic design like I did if you're only going to be competing with yourself, doing graphics for your own companies. If I wanted to go do graphics for another company, I'm probably good enough now. I've put in 2,000 hours over the course of 14 years. But it probably would take about that level of effort to be hireable in most situations, to be in the top 25%. But 20 hours put me far enough to where I needed to go. So what we need is to now build a plan that'll help move your skill in each area towards a 5. And what you need to do is pick something to do this summer that will let you spend 20 hours of focused, dedicated attention with good instruction. So it's not 20 hours of YouTube clicking. That's not a bad thing, but there's a better way. So we're going to go, everybody pop open your LinkedIn course. Open up your LinkedIn browser, what we've used for all of our videos this semester. And I will give you the exact same walkthrough that I gave Bobby, that I gave Chris, that I gave every single college student who's applied this technique and has reaped the rewards. Take a minute and pop that up. And here's what you're going to do. Let me give everybody a minute to get logged into it. Throw me a thumbs up when you're logged in. Couple people, couple others. Got there? All right, here's what you're going to do. You're going to come up to browse. You're going to come over here. You're going to look in either creative, business, or technology. Let's say that you want to become a better video creator, since that's something that we've touched on in this class, right? So you're going to come down and find video, but there's products and graphics and motion graphics and photography and web and visualization. And you're coming here and say, show all. And show all is going to say, well, you can explore these topics by any number of these things. As a tip, if you are looking to learn a specific piece of software like Premiere Pro, this essential training, 7 hours and 40 minutes, will probably take you almost 20 hours, right? So if you go through this and you just watch it once, that would be 8 hours. And then if you turn around and you download the exercise files, just watching a video is not going to be your learning, but going and download the exercise files. And if you go through and you click every single button and you do every single thing that they did, you're going to be dramatically better than what I was able to teach you in a couple of very short hours here. Now, some of the things you'll know already, but you will learn things every few minutes that you go, oh my gosh, that's better than what I realized. Oh, that's a different thing. Oh my gosh. I can tell you right now, I have put, and I've been at video editing for a long time, I've put about 15 hours into going through Premiere Pro specific tutorials this semester, and I still learn things. And it makes me better and faster, and everything flows because I put that time in. I fill in the gaps. But I've put way more time into other things too, adding other baskets of skills. So one thing you can do is come over to the side, and you can either sort by courses, which will show you only courses. So something like this, making a short film start to finish for my creators in the room. Or if you want to really understand cameras, there's 3 hours, etc. Video production, video editing fundamentals, that's only 37 minutes. Or if you want to go beyond the courses, do yourself a learning path. The learning path here, if I want to become a cinematographer, is 7 hours and 44 minutes, and it's a series of courses that they have specially put together that will take you a long ways towards your goal. If you have put the 20 hours into the become a cinematographer learning path, you are going to be indistinguishable to most people from somebody with 100 hours. If you put in 100 hours, you'll be indistinguishable to most people in internship and job opportunities as someone with 500 hours. If you implement the 80-20 rule, it will work. So go through here, do a browse, and what you need to do by next time is take these 5 skills, the ones you either already have and the ones that are related that you think will create opportunity, and you need to put together 10 hours worth of courses or learning path and list them out, okay? And that you're going to do this summer to change your trajectory onto that exponential path. So let's go to Jordan. Jordan, what was one of your things that you wanted to learn?
Hang on, let me pull it back up.
Actually, you know what? I haven't called on Laura yet. Laura, what's one of your things?
One of them was like TV production or also video editing, learning more.
Okay. So that's obviously that we just went through one of those, but with video editing specifically or post-production, you come in here, you say, what are the courses specifically? And you could go through the essential training, but you might be past that point and ready to move on to something a little more complicated. So you jump in, you say, okay, how about documentary storytelling? There's 2 hours, and that will fill in a ton of gaps in your knowledge about documentary storytelling? How about specifically how to make a video that teaches something, or how to make a video that sells something, or 3 hours on color correction? If you pick 10 hours worth of those courses, you will be force multiplied by next semester. You will come in, and I can promise everyone in this room, you will not only be one of the most accomplished and talented and insightful people in your future classes, if you continue to make this a habit, every one of you, anyone who does this, will be employed or the first employed at graduation. 100% guaranteed it. I've never seen this fail. So take the last 5 minutes of class and spend some time culling through and looking for your at least 10 hours of instruction for your 5 skills. This is your summer homework. The ones that do it will be successful. The ones that don't will wish they had. Stick with me for just a few more minutes while you're looking. I'm going to put 5 minutes on while you guys look, and then we'll wrap this up.
A quick question.
Please.
When I tried to log in with my library card number, it told me that my library doesn't have access.
So I can tell you right now, let me log out. So when you go to sign in, depending on how you get there, do you have the library card number?
Mm-hmm.
Or if you were at a different one, like on my iPad, it asks me for the library ID. And for Nashville, that is Nashville Public Library, all lowercase. When I've accidentally let the N be capital, I get that same message. And you have to make sure it's asking for your library card number. They have logins for like email and stuff. But if you get to this, this page with the library card number, then you put it in. Now, the other thing that's changed is LinkedIn bought out lynda.com, but they just like a month ago completed the shift and the transition. So I've noticed that I actually had to get a new library card at the end of last year, and it's a longer series of digits. I had an older one that was only like 6 or so digits, and that one didn't work anymore. So I had to go online and get a new library card, or I think I actually even had to go by and physically get one. But best use, yep. So it definitely works.
Because I think mine's one of the shorter ones.
So yes, so call the library and just say, hey, I think my library card's expired. I need a new library card to access the LinkedIn Learning, and they'll get you a new one. Or you can just try Nashville Library, get a card, and there's a link right there. You might need to put in a new address or information or something, but this will give you the new card. If it's the shorter one, it won't work anymore. Those like expired a few months ago.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Thanks for asking.
Do you know when our premiere and audition and everything is going to expire?
June or July, if I recall correctly.
Okay, thanks.
I asked the tech guy about that the other day, and I think he said everything, those licenses expire in June. Your library card doesn't traditionally expire. They just move to a new system.
Okay. And so I'm taking the remote video production class in the fall, so we'll have like a new license then?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
All right, I'm going to let you continue to work on those outside of class, but I just thought I would show you. I've got a couple different accounts, so this doesn't show everything that I've personally gone through this semester. But even though I teach video production and have taught audio and video for years, I still have been through 15 hours of courses here because I don't spend a ton of time doing, for example, promotional videos. And I don't spend a ton of time doing color correction. So even though I've done a fair amount of it, I knew that if I was going to teach it, I wanted an even deeper understanding. And by diving into those things, I found a variety of little bits and tricks and ideas that I just had never needed to develop, or that I had forgotten because I hadn't used them in so long. So I'm practicing what I preach, and you can see how many I've got in progress. Those are just the ones I've completed, but you can see how many I've got in progress because learning every time I do opens up some totally ridiculous new opportunity. It was in 2009, because I had done those things and produced those videos, that this guy, Nate Hertweck, was able to convince his boss at the Grammys to hire me for one Grammy camp. They didn't want to do it because it was going to cost more to fly me out from Nashville, but he showed them my book, he showed them my videos, and they said, oh, this guy can teach. And those were the early days of content creation. I've done 100 Grammy camps since. It's probably been 25% of my income for 11 years. That's taken me all over the country. And every project feels like a vacation because I just get to hang out in studios and help people learn stuff, right? All going back to those original goals. Ultimately, this friend of mine, Tim, that was the best man at my wedding, as I started building all those different websites and selling my own products, he came to me and said, hey, my wife has a clothing line, but she's never put it online. Would you be interested in putting that online with me? I already have the skills. We ran that successfully for a number of years, and then I sold to them later. On a mission trip to the Philippines, I was just going to shoot some footage of these orphanages that we were helping. I sat next to Scott on the plane. He said, oh, I like this video that you're making for us. We're about to do a TV show. Would you be interested in maybe doing some part-time editing? After I did it, help them with episode 2, they hired me to be full-time, or to do all of the post-production for the next 140 episodes. All of that led until literally one night at a party, that same guy, Garrison, that just sold his business for $1 million back at the very beginning. As I was talking to the owner of TEDx here in Nashville, Garrison walked up, threw his arm around the guy, and I didn't know that Garrison was actually, his digital marketing company was taking over the marketing for TEDx. But Garrison walked up, put his arm around him and said, if you haven't seen this guy's virtual reality talk, you've got to go over to his studio. I took my whole company over last week, and he put us all in VR to see the future of digital marketing. And that's what got me involved with TEDx. And of course, over that time, because of a lot of good luck and a lot of good opportunities, but I've built out that same dream family and stuff as well. And it's made all of the difference in my newest project, building the nursing school masterclass with my wife, which we're continuing to build and grow to this day, including this morning. So I'm excited for all that you guys do with it. Be thinking about those, make your list, and we'll wrap up this class next time when we're